Hi, this is Pinell County Sheriff Paul Babu, and I'm not being paid to give this endorsement. I recommend you tune into KQCK Live radio station. I listen, and you should too. Great talk shows and all the classic hits from the 70s to the 90s.
Welcome to PacWest Magazine, the radio show. The show about our exciting Pacific West Conference. The PacWest is made up of NCAA Division II universities from Arizona and Utah to California and Hawaii. It's the most beautiful and diverse athletic conference in the entire NCAA. This is Commissioner Bob Hogue, inviting you to join our outstanding coaches, student athletes, and administrators as we talk about the great excitement in the PacWest. Now here's Assistant Commissioner Tom Camillo, live from our studios in Santan, Arizona.
Hey, it's a beautiful day. Actually, it's a cold day. It was 30 degrees here this morning in the Santan Valley.
And it's 59 degrees right now. How nice is that?
And you got the air conditioning blowing. Actually, I think you turned it off.
No, it's on.
Is it on?
You know, amazingly, Snow Bowl and Sunrise both opened, today, I think.
Did they really?
Mm-hmm.
Snow up in that area. I'm watching. I see the Weather Channel on behind you there. It looks like the Midwest is getting hit with a huge storm. No such luck here, although my daughter keeps praying for a white Christmas in Phoenix. I said that's
it could have happened this morning if it rained.
It could have. It could have. But you're listening to PacWest Radio, Tom Camillo, Joe Carrero, and the nature of the Pacific West Conference when we do this show is that the guests are all over, everywhere along the Pacific Rim to the West Coast. We don't get a lot of in-guest studios. But today we're fortunate enough to have Jane Textera, the Assistant Commissioner for Compliance in the PacWest, joining us in studio. Jane, thanks for coming to the studio today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We had Jane on by phone a couple months ago. I know you're a native of Tucson.
Yes, Tucson, Arizona, East Side.
There you go. Today when we talked to Jane a few months ago, we talked about compliance, but obviously there's when we talked, there was a whole lot that we could have talked about. But I know this is a really interesting time because last night the basketball teams in the PacWest played, and then it's like the faucet turned off. There's nothing going on, I think, until the 29th. I think the next games are, if I'm not mistaken. But there is this break that the NCAA put in, I think, I don't know if it's specifically for Division II.
It's only D2 at this point.
Explain what this is and what happened and how this came about, why nobody's competing during this stretch.
Well, Division II really takes seriously the idea of the whole student, and they want to make sure that athletics, even though it is the footstep into an institution, and there's a lot of institutions that use that to drive enrollment for their institutions, they want to make sure those student athletes are being taken care of. It's a student athlete well-being initiative, and they passed that, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago, in which they're what is called the winter break. So during the time period of December 20th through the 26th, there is nothing that a student athlete can do that is required by athletics. That means they can't have a game, they can't go to practice, they get to just relax, recharge themselves after finals, and get ready for their next stretch in the spring semester. But also it gives just the time to kind of just regenerate and refresh and be a person, be a student. So that's important to Division II.
Is that part of the life and the balance that the NCAA Division II talks about and promotes? For
sure, it is. It's part of the D2 strategic platform and initiative, that life and the balance, balancing athletics and competition along with your academics and your other requirements that a student needs to do. Also, it helps those administrators who deal with sports. It gives them a chance to be with their families. It gives them a chance to kind of look at that break as a time to regenerate themselves also.
You're listening to PacWest Radio. Tom Camillo, Joe Carrero are visiting with Jane Textera, the Assistant Commissioner of Compliance with the Pacific West Conference. And Jane, you're heavily involved with the SAC, the Student Athlete Advisory Council, and each school has their own, and then there's a national one. And I want to talk a little bit about it. In October, there were meetings. But before we go there, I'd like to, in your discussions with the student athletes this winter break, how is their reaction to that? Are they very much in favor of it, or? They
very are much in favor of it. They like that downtime. They like being able to just relax, get a chance to go home. In some instances, there are student athletes who are from faraway places, such as, international students that may not have a chance to actually fly home and come back. But that winter break gives them that opportunity if they choose to take it. So the student athletes are highly in favor of this. It's definitely different than any other division, Division 1 or Division 3. Doesn't have this instituted 6-day, 7-day dead period in which nothing happens for their student athletes. So yeah, the student athletes are totally in favor of it. They love having the downtime. Yeah, in October, we did hold our annual PacWest SAC meetings in Anaheim, California, hosted by Cal Baptist University, who did a great job for us. We had over 45 people there. Of the 45, 35 of them were student athletes, and we had 10 advisors, which was great. And we met and talked about leadership initiatives that the conference wants to put forward from the student athletes. For instance, they started developing a social media policy for the conference by which they're going to ask all student athletes to follow as a peer-to-peer initiative. They also talked about community service. We actually spent time at the Orange County Mission in Tustin, California, working with that group, and we did a community service event where we helped out with cleaning of their kitchen and giving back to that organization. And that is what the kids really, really enjoy. They like giving back to those who support them and being part of the community. So that was a great initiative for us. We also met and discussed proposed NCAA legislation. So at the NCAA level, they like to make sure that all constituencies have input. And so they were able to vote, give their opinions, and those opinions were passed on to the National SAC member representative, who happens to be from Grand Canyon University,
Wow.
Sarah Bowen. And she takes that information back and meets with all the rest of her peers, and they discuss a national platform for the legislation that gets put forward to all the administrators as a potential vote.
Now, will Sarah go to the NCAA convention?
Yes, Sarah will be at the NCAA convention in Dallas, Texas, January of 2013. She will be there supporting the initiatives and the ideas and oppositions or supporting proposals that have been put forward and other initiatives that they want to lead.
So each of these, the SAC, there's the national one, and the conference helps facilitate that direction, but each school has their own. Do they do the same type of work, or do they set their sort of own initiatives around maybe a common theme that the conference has?
It's a little bit of both. They can have their own initiatives based on what their communities desire and what they want to give back to the communities, but they also do, again, like we have a diversity initiative that we're trying to support different groups on campus that they had decided to team up with other groups on campus to diversify themselves, but also to be more inclusive. I think that's something that you often see in institutions with student athletes, is they often don't want them to be excluded or out on an island and only be a group and only go to athletic events. So we're really trying to push, and the SAC student athletes of the PacWest are really trying to push an inclusive idea behind not just being student athletes, but going and supporting your international relations group or your, whatever particular group that is on campus that they choose to do activities with. So
you were a student athlete. You played softball at Texas.
Correct.
Was there
Horns.
was there a SAC back then?
Yes, there was. I think SAC's been going on, for years. Yeah, there was a SAC back then. I wasn't involved with it. It was my teammate who was involved with it, but she was very good at making sure we knew the issues, taking back our concerns. And SAC isn't just about community initiatives. It's about giving a voice to student athletes with their in-house administration. So if there's something going on that they believe they need to address, they have that ability to go to that student athlete leader and get that initiative heard by whatever administration that needs to be heard by. So they have a voice.
And this is at all levels, the SAC, D1, D2, D3?
Yep, SAC is all across the board.
If in your career, obviously as a student athlete, and then in your career in the profession, working at NCAA schools and at a conference, are there any sort of initiatives or maybe concerns that student athletes brought forward that administrators didn't really realize and now have come to pass? There's some things really stuck out?
Yeah, just recently it's been the deregulation of the recruiting legislation when it comes to telephone calls. In the past, the legislation was once per week for a incoming student athlete. Let's say they were in their junior or senior year in high school. They could be called one time a week. Could be their senior year in high school. One time per week. Well, that was built around when there was only one phone in the household. As technology has changed, we know everybody pretty much has a cell phone, and the prevalence of text messaging, that most students that I know of when I was on campus, they won't even talk to you unless it's through a text message or through Facebook or whatever. So they really led the initiative in deregulating that rule, so that it is now that if you are past June 15th going into your junior year, you can get text, you could get telephone calls as much as you want because they believe, and student athletes who put this initiative forward believe that we student athletes control the amount of response and amount of technology contact they want. If they don't want to be contacted, we all know we do this as adults, we silence it and move on, or don't answer the text message, or when it's more convenient, that's how they choose to be a part of that. So they actually presented that, and that got moved forward, and it actually passed last year and was implemented this year, and it seems to be going well.
When you look at rules like that change, it's kind of an interesting question. I've never thought about it this way, but you have schools that maybe violated those rules 2 or 3 years ago when they were in place, but now the student athletes speak in something like this and say, hey, this needs to be deregulated. So now you realize it's probably the best practice is now to change this. Are the schools still on probation for violating that because that was the rule at that time? Or is there a recognition that, hey, maybe that rule wasn't the best rule at that time? Or how does that work?
Well, if an institution has had a major infractions case that involved telephone contact or recruiting legislation, whatever that penalty is in place from the Committee on Infractions stays in place. If the rules change, it's from that point going forward. So if they were on a 2-year ban of calling student athletes, which would never, I shouldn't say never, hasn't happened, then that would still be in place. But unless they ask for an appeal of that to the Committee on Infractions, and they could do that, and the committee could change the penalty. But that has not happened as far as I know.
Joe, did you get a phone call? You got a question?
We got our first fan call for Jane over here.
Let me guess, it's a compliance person.
Johnny from Salt Lake City said, looking good.
Oh, thanks, Johnny. I'm single. I'm single, Johnny.
That's great. If we have, if there are fans, we do get a lot of fans throughout the country. It's
we didn't even give the phone number out.
Well, you will.
Johnny had to do some research.
He did. But 480-745-1033, 480-745-1033. We got to change your number to something like KQCK.
Like 1-800-CALL KQCK.
Something like that. But 480-745-1033. And if there's parents that you have an athlete that wants to play in college, we might be able to answer some of your questions or give some direction where Jane can, what she's permissible to do. But go ahead, feel free to call in. Like I said, we don't get a lot of in-guests because frankly, we have people in Hawaii and California and even up in Phoenix, a little bit of a trip down. But the SAC, the whole SAC program, it's been really successful, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's really grown. I'm so proud of our student athletes. We actually had a great opportunity when we were at the SAC in October that one of our student athletes, her name is Sierra Sanchez, and she's at Academy of Art University, and she is studying multimedia, and she's studying to be a reporter and be on television. And we had an opportunity to have her actually question and interview one of the individuals at the Orange County Mission. At first they wanted me to do it, and I was like, you know what, there's this great student athlete, an opportunity for her to use her skills, what she's learned, put together a potential segment for her, what they call a reel, and she just did a great job. She stepped right in, looked like a pro, did a great, and I think it's actually on our YouTube.
On the YouTube site.
On the YouTube site, so I'm really proud of her, and just great individuals. We've got great compliance individuals and great SAC leaders that have just really helped our student athletes grow into who they want to be and become leaders for the future of not only student athletes, but their institutions and their communities.
And the SAC students got to address the athletic directors and the administration in that room. And a lot of times when there are other schools, you don't put the face with the name. But I thought that was really effective. I enjoyed listening and learning from some of their comments.
Right. It was the first time that's ever happened. That was an initiative that was brought forward the previous year from the SAC group, that they wanted an opportunity to sit in front of the athletic directors and discuss what's going on with their group, if there have been concerns and issues that they wanted to bring together as a conference, which gave them that opportunity. And I was really proud of them for doing that. They did a really good job. They laid out the weekend, they laid out some of their initiatives, and they asked for some help on some initiatives, which the AD seemed really happy to help them with and move forward with that.
They had some great questions, and then they found out about my brother being on MTV. They were really fascinated about him being on Jackass. So that was like the questions turned a little bit from SAC to, hey, that's your brother. So, but one of them was and and her name is it
Susanna
Walmsley.
Walmsley.
It was really
HPU.
Yes, I picked her as player of the week, and I didn't realize she was in the room. Like you didn't put it together at first because you get so many athletes. But a couple of the athletic directors went, "Hey, remember she was in the room, and it was from another school." So it shows the impact of that communication. Joe, you got a call?
Got a couple right in a row there. Thanks for doing what you do for the PacWest, Reba, Detroit, Michigan.
Oh, thanks, Reba. I appreciate it. I love what I do.
Is there a school in Detroit?
No, but it
Probably just a fan out there or somebody
thank you.
that
it could be a parent.
one of your worldwide fans.
I have tons of
Are
them.
are you going to be doing any autographs on eBay this time?
I could.
Like that?
Yeah, for sure.
We actually do have a basketball player, and I think it's Chaminade from Detroit.
Oh, okay. Well,
Nice.
thanks for
They're
listening.
from everywhere. Huh?
Yeah, and
Right on.
I can't
I
remember
think-
which player, but I'm pretty sure he went to like Detroit Country Day School or something. I'm trying to think off the top of my
Well,
head
thanks,
here.
Reba. We all love what we do, and we do it for the kids. That's really what this
I
is
hope
about.
it's actually Reba McIntyre, though.
Hey, hey.
Tom, and you got a fan out there too. Another one. Another, I should say another. You should just get a board and start pinning your fans
Great.
up there. I would
Yeah.
have to keep buying pins every week. Luis Redner from Burbank said, "Tom, you're the best. Love your show."
Well, we appreciate that, the PacWest, and you know we got to thank Joe for allowing us to do this.
I love Tom. He gets embarrassed. He gets a little blushed out. and-
It's just I got home and I had to sign autographs for my wife.
Right,
that
right.
kind of thing. So, but I know Jane, it's the first time you've been in the studio, and Bob Hogue told you that it was a little different. I mean, the setup. He said he's waiting to hear your thoughts on this setup.
I think
in
this
here.
is great. He's got my wrestling fans over here. I'm a longtime wrestling fan. I actually
Soon we'll have your photo up on the wall.
Sure. I actually have a good friend that's in the wrestling organization over there, and I've been to many a wrestling event.
You don't have to do compliance for that wrestling.
No, I don't have to do compliance for that event. But it's interesting when I'm with him. He always has to be in character,
Oh, really?
and to have individuals walk up to him and whatever the storyline may be, and say, hey, where's so and so and what's going on, and he's always in character.
I have to ask, who is it?
Mark Henry is one of my good friends.
Is he in WWF?
Yeah, he's the world's strongest man.
Really? Mm-hmm. You got to hook me up. I don't think I've ever had him on.
They had that. When is the the wrestling show?
That would be Wednesdays at 2:30. And we have them. I mean, everybody from the Hulk to lots of
Mark Henry.
A lot of the old, a lot
They
of
used
the
to
old
call
school.
him. They used to call him Sexual Chocolate back in the day.
Is he a singer too?
No.
Oh no, that was from the Eddie Murphy
That was
show.
Eddie Murphy show. Yeah. No, Mark Henry, world's strongest man. Great friend of mine, great guy. So my wrestling love is over here.
It's the whole wall.
The whole
People
wall.
probably can't see it, but there's a whole wall of Hulk Hogan's over there with his autographs. So, talk about the compliance world. The NCAA convention coming up in January. If there are changes approved, then when does that stuff take effect?
Well, it actually depends on the legislation. Most of the legislation, if it's approved and then it's approved by vote at convention, it's voted on, approved at convention, and then that vote gets ratified by the board of directors, and that ratification tends to happen in April. What was voted on in January, once ratified by the board of directors in April, becomes effective in August. Usually, it's August 1 of the fall of that fall. There are times where legislation could become effective immediately, or for instance, this past year with the change in that telephone legislation we just spoke about, that was to become effective June 15th because the legislation said June 15th going into their junior or senior
Gotcha.
year. So instead of waiting a whole entire year
Right.
to put it in effect, they put it in effect right away. And sometimes there's emergency legislation that needs to be passed that comes in immediately depending on what the issue is. So for instance, there's talk right now with the, not to bring up politics, the Affordable Health Care Act, how that affects NCAA legislation. And if there's a need to actually put in emergency legislation that would fit within our legislation, but also follow the federal law.
Is all the voting for all this always done at the convention?
Yes, usually all the voting is done at convention. Yeah.
Is there with the way that the technology is there ever any thoughts about kind of doing it at different times of the year so you don't have to wait so long to implement?
I haven't heard anything. I think Division II and their philosophy is they like that coming together.
Okay.
They like that idea of being that cohesive unit to be able to get together and get networking and talk about the issues and be a part of that, and that they want to be able to bring all those issues to the front if that happens at a legislative convention. It's kind of like being on the floor of the Senate. There's actually someone who proposes the bill or proposes the legislation, and you have people talk about their positions, and a vote is called for.
Joe, you got another question?
Yes, Les and Sam, and Les said he met you at a game.
Uh-oh.
He is a former, I can't read my own writing here. Let me just read the note. Love the PacWest. If it's not for this show, I would not be able to follow it at all. I'm a graduate of Hawaii Hilo. Thanks, Tom and Joe, and he met you at a game. We never miss an episode. That's from Dixon, West Virginia, Les and Sam.
That is awesome. We appreciate it. We get
That is great.
We're getting a lot of calls. Jane, you're popular.
I get a lot of calls during the week, but Jane, I think you're probably going to have me answering the phones maybe another 40 hours or so this week.
It's we appreciate it if you want to call in. 480-745-1033. We'd like to know where you're listening from. In fact, Joe and I talked about this last week of getting a big giant map. We talked about last week of putting it up so that people can see, and then as callers call in for his different shows.
Then we need his fan map right next to it.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
Now we need one for you.
Yeah, of
right
course,
there, so that we could, so we can kind of track them. What's the hardest thing about compliance?
Wow, that's a great question. I think the hardest thing about compliance is that compliance individuals do care about the student athletes, and they do care about the institutions. And I think oftentimes that they get overlooked, and that they don't get appreciative responses from people. When a compliance officer has to say no, they're not saying no because they want to. That's part of their job. I think that we all feel that we're doing this because we love what we do for the kids, and there is a sense of order you have to have.
There's no glamour for it.
There's no glamour for it by any means, but you're also in the line of fire. If something goes wrong, compliance individuals usually are in the mix there, trying to protect institutions, protect student athletes, and follow the NCAA rules. So I think we have the best compliance people in the PacWest. They've done a great job from my new schools to my older schools. Just the cohesiveness and the teamwork attitude of the compliance people at the PacWest has just been tremendous, and I'm really appreciative of them, and I told them I'd give them a shout out. So shout out to my PacWest compliance folks, and Yoda, you know who you are. She's been very helpful with us, helping us try to streamline some processes and get us headed in the right direction.
When obviously there's things that people have to do, and the NCAA demands it, and you don't, there's things that I have to do in my role that the NCAA demands, and I'm like, I'm not always thrilled about. But as a compliance person, your job is really, you're trying to help the schools stay out of trouble, give them support if an audit comes down or there's a review coming down. That's really what your job is.
Correct. And that book is way too big. It's 200 and something pages that you're not going to not commit a violation. It happens. Gotcha. The idea behind it is to obviously educate so those don't happen as often or as frequent as they could happen. And also that you just want to be part of protecting your institution. And it's like you said, there's things that you don't want to do. There's times that I spent many a day and many hour at the office trying to protect our institution to make sure we had that paperwork in place. So if there was an audit, we would have that there for us too. I
had a football coach in my former institution who his previous job was coach and AD. And he said if you weren't reporting a violation, you were not checking often enough. And he said, really, compliance is about understanding how to ask the right questions. If it doesn't look right, ask the question, because that's going to keep you from getting in trouble.
Correct. On average, at Division II, you usually report between 7 to 10 violations, if not more, per institution, depending on, a lot of that was built on the telephone legislation, so now that number might dwindle. But the NCAA often thinks if you're not reporting violations, you must not be checking. And they actually will go in and look to see if an institution has reported violations and how many. And there's different levels of violations, and there's all technical.
So it's not a bad thing it's not a bad thing to report. It's that you're doing your due diligence to check, and when there's mistakes, you're teaching, hey, this is the right way, because you can never know that whole book.
Correct. It's not a bad thing to report. You're gonna make a mistake. You're gonna have a violation, and that's okay. It's okay to have one. Chalk it up to, you just made a mistake. But it's when that same violation becomes a repeated violation amongst your institution, or if you get even deeper, if you get into, agent issues like that's been on the news that we've seen with other big Division I programs, those becomes bigger. So once you get a big issue, then they start drilling it down to what else have you missed, versus the other way around.
The microscope comes on then
Yes,
at that point.
for
Joe,
sure.
Joe, you got a call.
Betty Marshall, Kalispell, Montana says, I think the better players should be able to get the perks such as trips, cars, and a bit of extra cash from commercials and so on. But I love the PacWest. Just wanted to give my 2 cents.
That's a great comment. I think that's been proposed at different levels. I think there's a lot more to it than just the being able to give a well-known student athlete a new Jeep or an additional cash or whatever that may be. I think there's also some issues, and we talk about this amongst our senior women administrators, is how do you decide who gets what? Because then you run into Title IX issues, or you run into employment issues. You could potentially run into, why is my son getting only 500 and your son who plays less is getting 1,000? Those are just big issues. So
see, I don't understand that, but
it's an interesting. You can look at it at both sides. One, they are getting something of value because you're getting a scholarship and getting an
Correct.
education. But then you look at it on the other side. Like for me, when I was in college, I had a journalism, so I was able to get paid to write stories for the local paper and kind of do my craft while I was in college. But then again, I was paying for my own tuition. So
Right.
it's like, where do you draw the line? Then you look at the big Division I schools that are making tons of money off the images of student athletes. But then again, they are getting an opportunity to play. So with that comes more responsibility.
Right.
If you do start paying them, and then it becomes like a job, which means you could be fired. So
Correct.
it's kind of like both ways. And I don't know that there's a right answer or a wrong answer. But it's going to create more headaches for
Right.
compliance officers if we go that route.
Right. And Division I actually for a while did pass an additional $2,000 financial aid to student athletes. And then again, it passed at convention and then got shut down at board of directors by an override. And basically what happened in that situation, the little bit I remember about it and know about it, is there are institutions and conferences that have money that could give that $2,000, and there's institutions and conferences that don't have that money. So really the fear there was what is really fair, what is really a level playing field at that point. And again, I think from my personal opinion, I think we do need to look at an adjustment of the financial aid legislation and what a student athlete can get, because right now they can only get tuition fees, room, board, and books, required books, and course materials. But if you live in a place, for instance, California, such as LA or Orange County, the cost of living is so high. So if it's costing me as a student athlete in Orange County $2,000 in rent, and it costs you in Pullman, Washington $500 in rent, there's a huge discrepancy there of I'm eating ramen noodles and you're having steak. So I think there is a need to do that, and I think they're looking at that.
It's kind of an interesting and can we see our guest here? Can you see him?
Oh,
on here?
yeah.
It's Crispy. And he's we brought him in because Jane's partial to corgis.
Yes.
And he's
he's part corgi.
And
he's part corgi.
So he's found a friend here. So Jane, I know that we have about a minute left on the program. If it's flown by, you'll be at the NCAA convention in January.
Correct.
And then what's coming up for SAC? What are the next kind of
We'll actually
events?
have a conference call, and we'll be discussing National SAC and a representative for National SAC, and getting ready to build on our October agenda for our next SAC meeting. And they're just doing a great job. They'll also be putting together their community engagement letters and activity sheet to us, as our community engagement award will be up for grabs. We had two great institutions go at them this year. I believe it was Dixie State and Academy of Art got them this year. So those will be up for grabs. And, looking forward to a great year. And, I've got our winter championships coming up. And
first basketball tournament?
First basketball tournament, March 7th, March 6th through the 8th.
6th through the 8th,
Yep.
and at Azusa
At Azusa Pacific. Yep. First PacWest tournament. Hope everybody comes out to see that, support our great student athletes, and we look forward to it.
Well, Jane, we hope you have a great holidays. Thanks for joining us here in the studio. The time has flown by, but we enjoy. I know you're going back down to Tucson, spending time with your family, and get ready for a busy spring.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Sure. Jane Textera, Tom D. Camillo, Joe Carrero on KQCK. We'll see you in a couple weeks on PacWest Radio.
And you need a helping